Hi, today I'm going to be talking about my business locator, which is a website used to find local businesses given a location, as well as some other search criteria such as the type of establishment, as well as the number of results that the user wants to see. This website is powered using the Yelp and the OpenWeatherMap API, and the endpoints that are used are Yelp's Search API, which lets us make search results on behalf of Yelp, as well as OpenWeatherMap's weather data search endpoint, which lets us get the weather in an area given a location of some kind. Let's take a look at the sequence diagram for the business locator. So firstly, when a user arrives on our website, their browser is going to request the root of our website. So they're going to send that request to our server, and our server is configured that whenever a user requests the root of the website, we're going to send back a status code of 200 as well as our index.html page if the file was found by the server. Then the user is going to be on our homepage and they're going to be presented with the form that was shown earlier. Now, when the user supplies the data to the form, the following data is supplied to the server: the location that they want to search at, the search term for the type of business they want to look for, the number of search results to know how many businesses to return, as well as a sorting criteria to sort by. After the user presses search on the form, the following data is going to be sent to our server and it's going to look like a search query of some sort. Now, what our server has to do with this data is make it into a suitable format to be sent off to the Yelp API first. So our server converts the data into a query string and makes it into a GET request to be sent off. Now, before our server actually sends it off, we also have to put our form of authorization attached to our request to let Yelp know that we're a user that's authorized in order to make search requests on their behalf. Now, in order to do that, we need the API key, which is going to be supplied. So after our server sends off the API request to Yelp, if Yelp has any results that will be returned, we're going to get a 200 status code, meaning that a valid response was received. And we're going to get the JSON containing all the search results for all the businesses that were found from the user's data, which looks like so. Now, this JSON contains info such as the name, location info, the URL, as well as the website. So that'll be handy to use later. So after that, our server is going to create a random session identifier, which basically allows our website to handle multiple user requests at the same time. So if two users are searching for something at the same time, our server knows how to basically, or rather which resources to give back to each user depending on what kind of businesses they searched for. So after creating that identifier, we need to actually get the images for all the businesses that we found. So we can do that by using some of the data that Yelp gave to us, which is a image URL. So we're going to basically make some requests to get those images. And each time an image is downloaded, it's going to send back a 200 status code, meaning that the image was successfully downloaded. And each time we get an image, our server is going to store those images in the images directory inside of a unique directory created for the user that's name is basically that state identifier that we created earlier. So next, what we have to do is, after all the images are downloaded, what we want to do is actually get the weather at each business location, because sometimes those locations may be scattered about. They may not be in one central location. So what we want to do is, for each business, the Yelp API gave us the latitude and the longitude of the business. And we can use that information to make a call to the OpenWeatherMap API. So our server is going to make another request to the OpenWeatherMap API for each business, and we want to take that business's latitude and longitude as well as our API key, and we want to make a GET request to OpenWeatherMap. Now, each time we make a request for each business, we're going to get a 200 status code if a valid response was returned, as well as a JSON file that contains the weather in Fahrenheit at the time that the user searched for it. So that response would look like this, for example. Now, after we get all the weather information, our server rather just has to generate an HTML that contains all the business names as well as all their addresses as well as the weather at each business, and then lastly just put an image from each business onto the website. Once the server's done generating that page, it's going to send that page back to the user with a 200 status code if everything was successful, and the user is going to get their search results that contains info from both of the APIs. Let's walk through the code of the business locator. So starting from the beginning, the user requests the root of our website. So the way our server handles this is, firstly, if the URL of the request is just a slash, which typically denotes root, what we're first going to do is create the cache for our API keys, which I will talk about later. But after doing that, our server is going to create a read stream with that index.html page. We're going to write in the header a 200 status code, as well as saying the content of the type to be a HTML page, and we're going to send that page back to the user. So, when the user arrives on the homepage, which looks like so, they're going to be given this form here, again for the location, type of establishment, number of results, and the sorting criteria. And the user is going to provide it, and after that, after they click search, our server is going to create a search object from Yelp that contains, again, those 4 fields, and it's going to basically get ready to send off that first request to Yelp given the user data. So this is where that info is caught, and it's going to be submitted soon. So let's go up to where that happens. So here we have our search object still that the user provided to us, and now we have to process the user input as well as give the required forms of authorization for Yelp. So what we have to do here is first get our API key for Yelp, and in the header we have to append our authorization bearer as well as our API key, and then the user's search terms we're going to turn into a query string so that we can append it to our endpoint URL. So here, after turning those requests into that query string URL, we're going to basically make an HTTPS request to Yelp's endpoint, which contains our user data, as well as the options, which contains our authorization with our API key. So after that is done and we get a response, we then have to download the images. So if we go down here, what we're going to do is we're going to basically iterate through each business, check if it has an image, and if it does, we're going to push it to a images array, which we have, and we're going to send down with each request. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make an HTTPS request for each image URL. After that, we're going to basically check to see if we've downloaded all the images, and when we have, which is denoted by having a counter that operates in the background and checking to see if it is equal to the total, we're going to retrieve the weather data from OpenWeatherMap using our Yelp search results meaning the businesses, our downloaded images, as well as the response that we're carrying over. So on to the second response now. So here, once we're ready to take on the second response, what we have to do is for each business that Yelp returned to us, we have to basically take its latitude and longitude for OpenWeatherMap. Now, luckily for us, Yelp provided this information, so what we could do is for each business, we can iterate through that, and we can create a new request using the business's latitude and longitude, as you can see here, as well as some other parameters such as our units, which will tell the API to return the results in Fahrenheit. And OpenWeatherMap, unlike Yelp, requires the API key to be in the request parameters instead of in like explicitly declared in the headers as we did before. So that's why this is here. And then once we're done making the request parameters by taking all those and turning it into a query string, what we're going to do then is we're going to make another HTTPS get request to OpenWeatherMap, and the URL is going to be the endpoint that we specified earlier, as well as our request parameters, which we turn into a query string. And then once we get a response for that, our callback here is basically just going to take our OpenWeatherMap data and just take all the relevant data and make an array out of it. And once we do that, and once we have both the Yelp data as well as the OpenWeatherMap data, we're ready to generate our HTML back for the user. So then after we get all that data and we're ready to generate the HTML, what our server is going to do is iterate through the data structure that we created that holds both APIs data. And what we're going to do is just keep appending some HTML from both APIs, and then simply we just return it back to the user. So let's see what the business locator looks like from the user's perspective. So firstly, let's start the server. So if we navigate to localhost 3000, we will have the website, or the root of the website, shown here firstly, as mentioned before. And the user has to fill out this form. So let's see an example. Let's say I want to do Flushing, New York. Let's say I want all restaurants in Flushing, New York, or rather 10 of them. And I want Yelp to sort the results by the rating. So when I press search, you see here, the first API was called, which is Yelp. Then after that, the second API, OpenWeatherMap, was called. And the user is now going to be taken to this result page where you can see we have different restaurants here. So we can see we have a hot pot restaurant, a noodle shop, as well as some cafes, some Korean restaurants, and things of that nature, as well as a picture from each of the businesses. So this website can facilitate multiple requests. You can see here I have a home button here that will take us back to the root of the site. And then if we do another request, such as New York, NY, and let's say I want to take the pharmacies in New York, and I want to sort them by the distance, and I press search, as you can see, it's going to show me the results again. And basically none of the images from the previous request will be on this site because the server knows how to separate each request's resources so that the whatever user search for what can be redirected to the correct search results page. So let's show an example where the server receives an unexpected input. So let's say I'm searching in New York, and I'm searching for restaurants, and I want to get the first 5, but I don't put any of the sorting criteria. what's going to happen? It's going to take us to this page here that says no results found. Try some other search parameters. Now, I put this here instead of a 404 because this specific, I guess, error code is kind of unique, and I wanted to give the user some more feedback on what they could do to get a successful query. So let's see another example where the server gets some unexpected input. So let's say that we received a request for the URL/test, and the server is not configured to do anything with /test. So let's see what happens. We can see that it's going to give us a 404 not found, meaning that the server doesn't know what to do with it, and by default, our server should send users back to a 404, which it does correctly. So let's answer a few questions about the business locator. Number one is, how did I guarantee that the first API is received before the second one is requested? So the way that I allowed for that to happen is in the workflow of the business locator, I made it so that the weather data would not be requested at all until all of the images from all the businesses are done downloading. So that means that the workflow for the business locator is request Yelp API data, then download all the images, then retrieve the weather data. Now, because of this, there is no way that the OpenWeatherMap API would execute before the Yelp API, since it would never be called until a response is received from the Yelp API, which calls the download images function. So secondly, is there any caching that is utilized in this web application? Yes. So initially, when the web app is first ran with the API keys in plain text, which is in a separate keys.json file, basically, as a user makes a first request to the server, this file is going to be wiped, since storing the APIs in plain text is a very big security concern. And so then what I did is, here in this create cache function, what I did was I am basically encrypting the API keys of both Yelp and OpenWeatherMap, and the encryption is done in base 64. Then what I'm doing is I'm taking those encrypted keys and I'm putting them in a cache.json file, which will store only the encrypted versions of the API keys. Then the keys.json file is going to be wiped and it's going to be left in this state here. And you can remake the cache if the API owner decides to put in new API keys if they need to be reset for some reason. So because of this, since there really isn't an expiration for Yelp or OpenWeatherMap APIs, the cache is, or rather the information is cached indefinitely until the API owner decides to put in their new keys into the keys.json file, which then when that happens, the cache is going to be regenerated with those new encrypted API keys, which then can be used by the application again. So a scenario that would happen with this application where the cache is stale is, as I said before as well, if for some reason there needed to be some manual intervention on the API keys and the API owner needs to reset it, then the cache would be stale. So in that scenario, the API owner would have to re-enter the new API keys so that the cache could be remade again. Anyways, thank you. That was my business locator. I hope you enjoyed it.